All right. So we are live, and this is Ian Hart with the Healing Hacks, and I'm here with Jim Girard. And Jim Girard is the creator of the Biocharger NG, and the Biocharger NG is a biohacking tool. It's something that I use, and Healing Hacks is about biohacking. Essentially, it's about basically sparking the healing process. And so Jim has an extensive background. I mean, Jim, I'm going to let you share. But one of the things I thought was amazing about you is that you worked with Orville Fitz, and he was a protege of Tesla. And Tesla, for me, is an amazing figure. And one of the quotes that I always repeat over and over again is, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of frequency, energy, and vibration. And that's really what we're kind of talking about here with the Biocharger. And so if you could just share quickly about how you ended up coming up with the Biocharger, because it's a pretty amazing tool.
Sure. So my history began around 1986. When I was slightly younger than that, I started developing alopecia, hair falling out in large spots, and trying to understand what the heck was going on. Cleaned up my diet. And then I had a landscaping company that I was doing while I was going to college, and was exposed to some pesticides. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go do organic fertilizers. And so I went to an organic farm convention and learned about subtle energies, which, something I never really knew much about. My background was, building things in mathematics, and never really thought much about electricity or anything else like that, and started to learn a little bit about biofeedback. And while I was at this convention, met a really interesting guy who was basically a mentor to me and guided me with, meeting interesting people along my path. And one of them happened to be Orville Fitz, which was worked with Tesla later on in Tesla's life, and when this guy was pretty young, and saw a lot of really interesting things. He had a lot of books and stuff that I was able to read, and came back and just started building Tesla coils. I had this passion about Tesla and his work, and started building all sites of Tesla coils. I built, Tesla coils 4 feet in diameter, 8 feet tall, that were generating 15, 20-foot lightning discharges, to
wow,
doing conical coils, pancake coils, experimenting with different lights, spark gap design, and pulse into spark gap. And came across Lukowski's work and Reif's work, and became interested in applying it towards what I learned about Reif and Lukowski. And their work was the folklores and stories of success in treating all sorts of different things. So I thought, let's try building some of these devices, and started experimenting, and had friends coming over, checking it out, seeing what it was all about. And pretty soon I was coaxed into manufacturing, but was always still expanding, learning. Came across Reif's work and started building his device, which is more using a shortwave radio instead of Lukowski's work, was using a carrier wave, using a Tesla coil, utilizing a shortwave radio.
Now I have a question about Reif, because I've heard a lot of people say that his original work, or his work, has yet to be reproduced, or they couldn't really figure out how he was doing it, and that some of his work was destroyed. And is that true, or have people been able to
So I see two different types of Reif machines. So there was what the John Crane's work of.
Actually, let me for the listeners real quick. Royal Reif created a machine which you can go into more details. So for people who are listening, and he was curing, could you say, like almost every disease? Is that?
Well, there was an article in the San Diego paper that was with a bunch of scientists and doctors and Royal Reif, who said that they had the cure for cancer, and they supposedly did 16 for 16 or 12 for 12 cancer people that had used it. And there was a lot of subsequent work where there were other doctors and surgeons that were using it. And then you read about the prosecution that what happened with it. So it was more just a mere curiosity: is it to pass the BS test, which is build the stuff and let's just see what happens. So
right.
How I look at it, what Reif was actually doing was he utilized the shortwave radio that he did pulse width modulation. And several of the things that they were able to do with the pulse width modulation was, hold on a minute.
Maybe that's Mike trying to log on.
No, it wasn't Mike. It was Jim, my business partner.
Oh, okay.
But the pulse width modulation with Rife, what happens is, and what's really unique about it is it generates different sets of harmonics and frequencies.
Okay.
So when I look at it technically speaking, and most people really consider Rife as like a targeted thing where he just generates a particular frequency to target a particular pathogen.
Right.
But in reality, what he was doing is he generated a wide spectrum of frequencies, very similar spectrum of frequencies as what you would see with the multi-wave oscillator. But unlike the multi-wave oscillator utilized in a spark gap design, it only generated one set of harmonics and frequencies. The beauty of Rife, what he found out is as you change the pulse width modulation, you generate unique sets of harmonics and frequencies. And if you look at Rife's work as it developed, so there were 3 versions of Rife's that were made. So there was the original version where he just pulsed it at a particular frequency that generated that set of harmonics and frequencies for a short period of time.
Okay.
Then he found out if he did narrow sweeps around particular frequencies, you generate clumps of harmonics and frequencies that are over a very narrow spectrum. So you're just really just creating like these clusters of frequencies throughout the spectrum when you just slightly changed it. And then there was the Wayland version. What's that?
Now, can we, for the listeners who, I've always found that when I speak in terms of frequency to people, they have a hard time understanding it. And so can we backtrack a little bit and just explain to them, like when we're talking about frequency, for example, with the Biocharger, you have something that targets the liver, and the cells of the liver, they are vibrating at a specific frequency. Is that correct? Would you say something like that?
Yeah, so there are, if you look at things on a cellular level, actually, if you look at everything in life, I mean, you look at our bodies, our heart's electrical, our brain's electrical, our nervous system electrical, chemistry's electrical, it's electrons in orbit and charge. And then if you even look at cells on a cellular level, there's frequencies, there's voltage, there's capacitance and reactance. Right. So the frequency is actually related. So that study that we started to talk about earlier, I think it was before the conversation, they were investigating, okay, how do we calculate frequency to cell?
And this was at the Jesuit University, the one that they did the $65 million towards?
Yes. So they were doing a $65 million study. They were investigating the effects of frequencies and voltage on cells. So what they determined is, if you look at the RNA DNA, it's like this helix coil.
Right.
This helix coil has a specific wavelength. So if you actually measure the distance, the diameter across the cell, there's a corresponding wavelength that's associated with it. And that's the frequency you're trying to work with, or a harmonic thereof. So the idea that what Rife was doing, what Lakosky was doing with their frequencies and harmonics generation is they're generating a wide spectrum of frequencies and harmonics that cover from AM, FM, shortwave, long wave, UHF, VHF, for those who remember the old TV stuff, microwave, millimeter, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, all the way up through visible light. We're generating this wide spectrum of frequencies, and they're literally quadrillions of frequencies from 0 to visible light.
Right.
And with electrons, so one of the things that happens in nature is you get these wide spectrums of frequencies and harmonics, and we can measure it with spectrum analysis. That's caused from all the solar systems, galaxies, planets, some of them are exploding and mixing and spinning, and they're generating this white background noise that cover this entire spectrum, generating quadrillions of frequencies simultaneously. We also have literally hundreds of lightning discharges that happen every second, or up to 100 lightning discharges every second, that ring the upper atmosphere of these harmonics and frequencies that cover, again, this whole spectrum of frequencies.
So are those things affecting us on a personal level? Like when you talk about that, like say there's tons of lightning going on, we're being affected by this frequency, correct?
That is an essential part of life. Without that, we are dead. If you actually shield yourself from that, you are dead. So I think that's one of the things in our modern lifestyle, we're prevented, we're indoors, we're in buildings that have cement, have rebar, that act like a grounded, shielded Faraday cage that prevent that from it. And they're an essential part that trigger those frequencies that we're talking about, those spectrums of frequencies. And as Tesla would say, that we're related cellularly as frequencies and frequencies and harmonics. It spans this whole spectrum.
Yeah. And then we're being exposed to the new lighting that they have.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the other things that the biocharger does also is we generate those with the lights that you see. So we're generating light that what you would see in nature, not from the sunlight, but the light caused. What you see in the blue in the sky is related to all these different gases that are in the atmosphere. They're being excited by solar radiation. It releases photons of light. And when you mix all the colors, gases together, you'll see blue. But what we see in the biocharger is all the different gases separately. They produce different spectrums of frequencies as it relates to the type of gas that you would have. So in chemistry, you burn the flame and you can see the gas spectrometry of the different gases emitting.
Right.
And that may determine frequencies in that visible light that they're looking at. Or you can excite it by voltage, and it excites to fluorescent and releases photons of light at quadrillion times a second, or over a quadrillion times a second.
And that's essentially what those little tubes in the end, the biocharger, are releasing, and your body is taking in that frequency.
Yeah, it's absorbing. It's producing the biocharger is producing those spectrums of frequencies that you would see in the visible light spectrum as it relates to different gases being excited to excitation from cosmic rays to solar radiation.
So is it fair to say
another essential part of life?
Is it fair to say that it would be more beneficial to have the least amount of clothing on, or the clothing wouldn't matter so much? Like, say if you had something that has like 2% silver in it, like some of the Lululemon shirts or something like that, is that going to block some of that frequency?
Well, also it's not grounded or anything. I don't think that's really a problem. There might be a part of it where it might arc a little bit if you actually had threaded aluminum and you were up really close to something like that. But if you're talking about those shirts that some people wear for blocking solar radiation, or for cell phones,
EMF,
I mean, I have a completely different take that's probably different than probably 99% of your audience. But
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so back to the story that we're talking about, the spectrum of light and frequencies that cover AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, UHF, VHF.
Right.
That whole spectrum of frequencies are an essential part of life. And there are people that talk about, cell phones, those frequencies that are emitted from a cell phone are bad.
Right.
Well, when you really look at it, nature's producing those particular frequencies. It's producing 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G.
Even 5G.
Yeah. And also when you look at the actual studies behind it. So if you look at what the World Health Organization had to say about it, they said that absolutely there is no history of danger using cell phones in health. Same thing with, they investigated a whole bunch of different things, including go back to AM, FM radio and stuff.
Well, wasn't there, I believe that I saw that there was 3 independent governments had studied if you were exposed to higher than 3 millimoles or something like that.
Yeah, there was standards that's required that you want to meet. So obviously you wouldn't want to stick your head in the microwave.
Right.
You could take that same signal that you're producing from the microwave, turn the power down a little bit, quite a bit. Or like what Biocharger does is we spread the frequency across a very wide spectrum. We spread the energy across a very wide spectrum of frequencies. So we're not just directing all our energy at the carrier wave of our cell phone, but we're actually covering AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, and a bunch of harmonics in between all the way up through there, up through visible light. So,
so you're saying we shouldn't worry about, like there's a big scare with the 5G stuff coming out.
I don't really, here's my argument with it. Okay. World Health Organization, our own federal government have both said that cell phone transmissions are safe. 750 scientists from the European Union had looked at 40,000 different studies, said cell phones are safe. They also looked at the history of it, before cell phones and after cell phones. So if you look at, presently we have 4 billion cell phone users in the United States, the world.
Right.
We have 360 million cell phone users in the United States alone. And you know how it is. Everyone has it, right up their rear ends, up to their neck all the time, using it all the time, over 20 years of history behind it. So with those types of numbers, we would be seeing it as it relates to 4 billion, 1 in 1,000's 4 million. You'd be seeing 4 million cancer of, they looked at everything from around the neck, brain, breast, shoulders,
Yeah.
all of them. We didn't see any increase before and after that would be significantly related to, the sheer numbers of people actually using it. You know how we are. We're not using it casually. Everyone's using it constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to say that there is any serious evidence now, one of the things that they looked at also is, they can't deny that there are people that have this effect. When I'm around certain things, I have a problem with it. And they noted that in certain studies, they would see these, what they would consider anomalies, where it wasn't statistically significant in the group study that they were doing, but it was an endpoint that said, okay, we may or may not have an issue with that. Well, they compared that with all the other studies that we looked at. They couldn't see any interlink that would connect it to be radio-based related. It could have been all sorts of other factors that could have happened.
Even with, say, like smart meters, because I saw one study where they put people next to a smart meter and they did blood tests before and after, and everybody had different actual reactions to it. Some had like the blood clumped together, others like stacked on top of it, and then some people were okay and stuff like that.
The whole idea of I think that you can consistently see that with dark field microscopy anyway, which is what you're talking about.
Okay.
There's so many different factors. I don't know if you've ever used much with dark field microscopy, but
No.
That's the type of thing they're looking at with their clumping in the blood and things like that. And that really, if I eat the wrong thing right before I do that, that would show up as something like that. If I drank a soda beforehand,
right,
before the blood work or something.
If you have like fried canola oil or something like that.
I did something right beforehand. I took a cigarette right between, I did my little 5G or before or after. There's all sorts of different ways you can look at it, but statistically speaking, I don't really see any evidence that really supports the hysteria around it. I think a lot of it is driven by these people that are selling the wares that, we can block it, which I even didn't find that in itself troubling to begin with, because I believe that those are an essential part of life. And the more we shield ourselves from that natural energy that we get, and then from an engineering perspective, saying you got this little magic box that shields my cell phone from getting producing any signal that's going to affect me, but at the same time work. And then even if you say I've got that magic box, still not preventing the guy that's transmitting from the solar towers, whether I have this around or not, I'm still getting that same signal anyway. So blocking that isn't really going to do all that much different than what that's doing, which isn't really, I believe, doing all that much.
So let me ask you about nature then, because I just came back from Peru. I was in the Amazon, and I sleep like an absolute baby when I'm not surrounded by all the Wi-Fi and the electricity. And I have a place down in Costa Rica in the middle of the jungle, no electricity. And when I'm back in society here, I have a harder time sleeping. I don't go to sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night. Is there something about the frequency of nature or the vibration or maybe the latitude on the earth? Because I know that changes.
Well, how much do you spend on social media time on that?
Per day?
Yeah.
I would say probably 5 to 6 hours a day.
So you didn't have any of that access to it while you were in Peru, right?
Nope.
So you just picked up 5 or 6 hours right there. So you're already winding down. You're not energized. Okay, what's the next thing that's coming up off of social media or as well as my lifestyle of what's going on?
Okay.
Granted, you're not also, and they probably didn't have a lot of light. So probably 6 or 7 o'clock, you depending on where you're at. If you were so remote, they didn't have any power. It was just periodically where you're running batteries. That's just a few little lights popped up here and there, or I don't know what situation we're in, but all those things led to you're less around the artificial stuff and more closely related to, the cosmic rays that are out there. And how do the cosmic rays interact with some of the other stuff? We don't see that with like interference with cell phones and things like that. That's one of the things I always look at, or car radios and things like that. If there was interference with other frequencies that are happening, we'd be getting a mishmash of everyone talking on cell phones.
Right.
But the idea that they're not even in communique, much like I look as you have 3 tuning forks. You have 2 of them that are in tune together, and you have one that's not. You bang one, the other one starts vibrating, the other one doesn't. So through sympathetic vibration, and how that interacts, and that's related to how I believe these things are working through that vibration.
Gotcha.
It's just really merely hitting the right note in order to have an effect. But the question is with our limited electronics, we can only create that snapshot. So we don't have access to the universes that create this moment that's generating the white noise that we measure with our spectrum analysis. So with our limited electronics, we can generate hundreds of thousands of harmonics and frequencies, which sounds like a lot, but in a myriad of quadrillions of frequencies, that's not really that many to spit in a bucket. So what we're trying to do is, how do we create our harmonics and frequencies that we generate to be in the most effective manner? So we can target it, so we slightly change our harmonics and frequencies. So if you look at it over time, they're just a bunch of clumped through AM, FM, shortwave, long wave. They're all just clumped together, just slightly changed, maybe only by thousandths of a hertz or hundredths of a hertz between each one as you're changing them. Or you can do a myriad of just changing it like Hoyland was doing with the Wright machine, where he was just sweeping from 500 hertz to 50,000 hertz and didn't worry about any particular frequency he wanted, but just constantly changing it so you generate new sets all the time. So that's the things that we do with our recipes and programs.
Okay, so that's exactly the next thing I was going to kind of segue into. Is like, how are you figuring out what frequencies to use for what recipes? And so for the people listening, the Biocharger, I've used a bunch of different frequency generators, pulsed electromagnetic frequency, and so the Biocharger NG is a tool that emits photon. It's basically photon therapy. Could you say it? And then would you call it photon therapy? Or
some people call it photonics, some people call it biophotons, some people call it light therapy. But really what we're trying to do is produce those frequencies in the visible light spectrum as it relates to physics, which would be excitation of gases that release photons of light. So, and that's releasing it, in the visible light spectrum between 10 to the 12th and 10 to the 16th hertz. I have a little chart that I usually have that shows the spectrum lines that you normally have in physics, as well as I have the whole electromagnetic spectrum that shows that AM, FM, shortwave, long wave, covers the whole spectrum all the way through X-rays and gammas and all that. So ionized. But
so now with the Biocharger NG, like there'll be a program for, say, let's say liver support, right? How are you determining what frequencies? How are you coming up with the recipe? So the Biocharger has what's called recipes that are specific for certain ailments and issues, correct?
Yeah. So we have many different ways. So we have a research group. We have other practitioners. We have other users of the Biochargers who are practitioners and skilled in the art of frequency devices. They have come up with particular recipes that they are programs and frequencies that they thought would work well. They gave it to us. We created recipes based off of that. We did testing with it, and then we put it out into the open. Another way we get our recipes is Rife. There are plenty of different Rife sites that are out there that documented different particular frequencies. And then what we do with those recipes is any particular frequency, we'll do a narrow sweep around it. So we're not just generating that particular pulse frequency and the subsequent harmonics that go all the way up, but over time, what we do is every second we're slightly changing that. So it may be 727, which is a really popular Rife frequency. So we may start off at 727.001 hertz, and then we'll go up to 727.002 hertz, and then 727 all 3 hertz or 0.003 hertz, all the way up to 728 over a 20-minute period of time.
Okay.
Or we do other recipes that you can look at things, scientifically. So you can see, figuring out diameters of cells and figuring out particular frequencies and harmonics that are related to that particular diameter of any thing that you're looking at specifically. So we approach recipes in multiple different manners. We also have recipes that are based off of mathematical principles. So my background is mathematics, and so one of the recipes we have is the Fibonacci sequence. So
Right. Yeah.
there's a mathematical relationship between all the harmonics and frequencies generated. So there's
Yep.
this geometry process it follows as.
Can you explain what's happening to the cells? Give an understanding for the people watching. Like these frequencies and the photons are being emitted. It's hitting the body, and maybe give like a sneak peek of what's going on inside the cell.
So there have been lots of studies that are beginning to investigate that. So several things that have happened. So on the frequencies and harmonics. So if you look at things, much like the car radio or the tuning fork analogy. So if you look at the tuning fork, and if I hit the right frequency, I can, through sympathetic vibration, cause the other tuning fork to ring. So if I generate that particular harmonic on a cellular level frequency, I could begin to ring that cell and transfer energy, much like you could transfer energy like a voice or a signal or something like that you normally do with radio. Then we superimpose on top of that a voltage. So surrounding every cell is a cell membrane, and it acts like an insulator dielectric. And that insulator dielectric resists voltage, but over a period, as you increase that voltage, that will finally break down where it will just short circuit through it. Well, what happens in between time, though, is you can start to leak voltage from the outside of the cell membrane wall into the nucleus of the cell. And at that point, what you're affecting is the ATP. So it's been proven that through magnetic fields or electric fields, you can affect that ATP, which is measured in the transmembrane potential, which is a voltage. So as we age, that androstenedione triphosphate or adenosine triphosphate, which is measured in voltage, drops. So as the cells are repairing itself, so if you look at our bodies from 5 years ago, we don't have a single cell that we've had today.
Right.
The cells are always replacing itself. So in this replacing process, what they do is the cell has this charge across the cell membrane wall, which is the ATP. So if the ATP, that charge is sufficiently high enough, then you got mitochondria, so the cell replicates properly, and everything is in balance. As that voltage drops, the mitochondria cuts off, then the cell goes through mitosis. First it replicates into a damaged cell, and it keeps doing that until it finally dies off.
Right.
So there's a relationship between this voltage the voltage on the TMP and the frequency that has a direct impact on a cellular level.
So a good way of saying that it's a massive tuning fork for the cells that need to be brought back into harmony that might be out of harmony.
Yeah, so two things that are happening. So if you have a bunch of so what we're trying to do is generate a bunch of different frequencies and harmonics simultaneously. That's what we're doing. You're generating literally hundreds of thousands of different harmonics and frequencies. So every second. So when we're doing that, whatever frequency is tuned to those particular harmonics that we're generating, if there's anything on the cellular level that's looking for that, it starts to ring.
Right.
But then on top of that, we superimpose the voltage on that. And that's the beauty of why you want to use a Tesla coil versus a shortwave radios. You get the voltage component because you need sufficient voltage, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of volts, to start leaking energy into the nucleus of the cell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Doing that, then you can have that effect on the ATP and stuff. So we're communicating to the cell on a frequency level, but regardless of the fact, we're still hitting everything on a cellular level with the voltage part of it. So we're trying to charge the cell up, but we're also trying to communicate with it.
Can you also just explain a little bit about that study? So above 200,000 volts at Jesuit University, because I guess it started to kill cancer cells or something to that effect.
Well, here's what they discovered is surrounding that cell is a cell membrane, and that membrane actually changes as it becomes diseased. So two things that they discovered within the study. One is that the physical shape of the cell changes. So its ability to evenly distribute the charge is greatly diminished by its physical shape. So typically a healthy, really healthy cell is perfectly spherical cell. Yep. So when it's in that position, then the cell can evenly distribute the voltage across that, a higher voltage, before you have any breakdown. Whereas the unhealthy cells tend to be more like a football shape, which concentrates the charges on its edges. Use the amount of charge it can store across that the cell membrane wall. The other thing that happens is the dielectric constant of it actually changes. So if you look at on a cellular level, surrounding this that cell membrane, and its insulation capability changes as it becomes diseased. It becomes more conductive. So its ability to withstand the voltage is greatly diminished. So that you can actually, first what happens is the voltage is low enough, you start to leak voltage into the nucleus, but if you crank the voltage high enough, you can actually destroy the cancer cells. So like there's a company called NanoKnife right now. So one of the ways in which they kill cancer cells is they'll stick electrodes inside of the Oh, hello?
Is that Mike? It says Michael's on.
Yep. Yeah, so you stick the electrodes inside the cancer cells, and it causes the cancer cells to open up or porate. And what they found within that same study is cancer cells require hundreds of thousands of volts per meter before it starts to break down, whereas a healthy stem cells up to 10 million volts before the dielectric actually begins to break down. But other cells, millions of volts, be able to do that. So one of the things that they're doing is they'll stick the high voltage into it, causes the cancer cells to open up or porate, which makes it a better drug delivery system to get it into the nucleus of the cell. Because that's the key is chemotherapy is you got to get it into the nucleus of the cell. Whereas found in healthy tissue, that cell membrane isn't gating because the voltage isn't having an effect because of its physical shape, and the dielectric of the insulation of the cell membrane itself greatly increases the ability to store voltage across that cell membrane wall. Awesome.
So I've used, just to list off, I've used Beamer, Pulse, Amp Coil, trying to think of some of the other ones that I've used before. And so I felt something from them, but when I did the Biocharger the first time, the first program I ran was something 444. And harmonic 444. And the only reason I did that is because I tend to see 444 everywhere. It's like this trigger that I see it on clocks, and I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. And I had the most energy I'd ever had in like years. And also what I noticed, which this might be a little bit too much information, but I noticed I passed mucus out of my body. And that was like instant result. And I hadn't felt or seen any of that with the other pulsed electromagnetic frequencies or any of the frequency generators. So what's the difference here between some of these pulsed electromagnetic frequencies?
So the first one you're talking about, those are what I consider the magnetic field, the amp coil, the Beamer, the IRMS 2000. They produce a magnetic field that induces a voltage on a cellular level, or even in a coil. Anything that's a coil of wire, it's going to induce a voltage into it. That's considerably different than the frequencies and harmonics. So frequencies and harmonics are actually generating these little radio stations. So in the terms of like Rife, the multi-wave oscillator, the Biocharger, we're generating hundreds of thousands of little radio stations at very weak power levels at a very wide spectrum of frequencies that are broadcasting these little radio stations versus like a magnet where you're producing a magnetic field with it. Now, the beauty of the Biocharger with the Tesla coil is you have that magnetic field component. So the beauty with the Tesla coils is internally in the box is a primary coil, and then you have the secondary coil that's tuned to that produces the high voltage electric field.
I should actually show it. There it is.
Yeah, but internally in the box, we have that PEMF style like you would see with the amp coil or some of the pulse systems that made the pop, but they produce that magnetic field. So we have that component with it, but we also have the frequencies and harmonics that come off to the secondary and the high voltage and the light. So they have one part of the puzzle, but they don't really have all the pieces. The Beamer works quite a bit different than the amp coil. The amp coil is more of the very strong magnetic field. You'll probably feel that a little bit more than, whereas the Beamer, they have a proprietary, and their magnetic field is more on the range of what the Earth would be as far as if you measure their, maybe a 30 or 40 Gauss or somewhere in that range. Whereas these other devices, the high energies for a short period of time could be in the Teslas, the magnetic fields, but they break off. So those amp coils, when you get really close to them, they're putting in a lot of magnetic field strength. The Biocharger has that high energy, high magnetic field strength internally in the box, but around the edges of it, we're down in the range of where the Beamer would be, which is more in the magnetic field of the York portion of it. So our magnetic field isn't as quite as strong as, say, the amp coil, but with the versatility, what you see at the amp coil, they could adjust their frequencies, but they could only change that up to 10,000 hertz. We can go up to 50 kV with ours, plus the frequencies and harmonics that we generate with ours is significantly different. And power levels, I believe, are significantly higher with the Biocharger.
Gotcha.
Plus, we have that voltage and the frequencies and the harmonics and the light part of it that goes along with it. So, I believe they have a unique part that's generated within that 4 sets. So you have when you consider the PEMF that would follow the Biocharger, I just consider PEMF being the magnetic field.
Okay.
The frequencies and the harmonics, or the multi-wave oscillators like the Lukowski device or the Biocharger or Rife machines, anything on those levels are more of the frequencies and the harmonics. And some of those within that, when you look at the multi-wave oscillators, then they have the high voltage, which is what the Tesla coil produces. So we have that component that goes along with it. And then the light therapy. So there's a lot of people in physical therapy and things that are beginning to use cold lasers, or even the far infrared lights that people are using. So there's that whole spectrum of lighting that also has that impact of it. So I consider those 4 fields, and we're covering all 4 of those fields in all in one device. And we can do multiple people at a time. So you can easily do 6 people as you do 1 person. And that's what's really awesome about the Biocharger.
Oh, that makes my life a lot easier, because I'm trying to help a lot of people in different ways. And I've had these other frequency generators, and it's like you can only put it with 1 person. And we train people in groups. And this is a great tool for pre and post training. And with that, I would love to know what recipes, like what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite recipe that you use, or favorites? Or
well, there's a lot of things. I mean, what's neat about me is I have the opportunity, the R&D lab. So right. I for me right now, the most exciting thing that I'm using right now, and it's been built into all the Biochargers. We haven't released it yet, but in the back door we have a little audio modulation capability with it.
Oh, really?
So I can literally play music off the top of the Biocharger. So
no way.
like things like Bach, or I have the Ohm that plays, or even rock and roll that I'm related to. I mean, you can hear every instrument, you can hear all the voices and stuff like that. I'm working on the resonator part to really get the sound out of it, because I still have a little bit of hissing going on with it.
So you're saying from the top of that?
Yeah, I'll send you a video of it. Yeah, please.
Oh man, I'm excited about that. So what kind of music do you like? Like what's the rock and roll that you can play on there?
I can play anything. I like Rush. I'm a big Rush fan. Bob Seger.
All right.
But yeah, you hear all the voice clearly. You hear the instruments clearly. You hear a little bit of hissing in the background, and I'm working on getting that hissing out of it. And if I just run it without any, like what I consider resonator on it,
yeah,
and it's a lot of staticky going into it.
Yeah.
But now that I've been working on my the resonator that goes on top of it, I'm really getting the sound quality down, and I'm hoping to have it down to CD quality. But that's the type of things that we're working in the horizon. But as recipes go, I like the wide sweep ones. I like the Fibonacci. I like the default recipe.
Yeah.
But there's a multitude of the wide sweep recipes I like. But there's also the harmonic interlude is a really good one. Specifics. Yeah, I think that those are usually my main ones there.
So you're telling me that I don't have to get a new Biocharger. I could actually just have that one linked up, and it will be connected with the technology, which is something I'd like to explain to the viewers, that you guys have taken this technology and you've intertwined it with the 21st century technology, which is the ease of use, which is awesome. It's connected to the computer. I just hit play on one of the recipes and there I go.
Yeah. Well, and also as we create new recipes. So, one of the drawbacks of those other devices that are out there, once you get it, you got your stack of recipes and that's it. You can't really add to the programs that you have other than sending it back in. Where with us, we're constantly updating our library. And as we make that available, it's available for everyone as long as you're connected to the cloud and it's operating. And we can do remote diagnostics if we do it, if we need to. But built in the back of it, we have an optical port, so there's a way you can hook it up to play the music. But also the just the way in which we made it. Tesla wouldn't have used spark gap or vacuum tube. He'd take advantage of the cloud structure. So most of our computing's done up in the cloud. So we're able to, down below in our computer in the Biocharger itself, we store what we need to store in there, and we can run, a bunch of different recipes or programs that are in it. And as we add it, they're available for you to access it.
Now, can you give me some, I've gone online and I've seen some amazing things. I've heard a lot of people talk about, parasites being killed off by using the ParaCleanse or the one of the Paraharmonics. And can you just tell me some of the success stories that you've had with people using this machine?
Well, we're not a medical device. I want to be clear that we're not a medical device.
Right.
The things that we mostly see are better sleep,
mm-hmm.
more energy,
right,
better mental clarity, definitely
right.
better sleep, less pain, a little bit more step, more energy.
Step. Yeah. Those are all the things that I noticed right away. And
that's what we like to keep it within that realm. I mean, it's anything else is we hear anecdotes of other things, but we get great feedback from people. So for whatever they're using it for, so I'd say 20 or 30% of the people have their own specific outcomes that they'd like to achieve with it.
Right.
And one of the things that we offer is that return policy. So we want to make sure that people are totally happy with the Biocharger.
Yeah.
And so on that level, everyone's very satisfied with it. We don't get Biochargers returned very often.
Yeah, you know what? I've been exposed to a lot of these, and I paid. It's a decent amount, but I'm like, I bought it. Honestly, I bought it personally for me because I just love this stuff. But I also knew that it would help my client base tremendously, and we've seen a lot of feedback from it. And for me, it's well worth the investment. I mean, like, how much money can you, having more energy, having more pep in your step, having more vitality in life. It's like, you can't put a number on that. And when you feel your energy increase, it's like, yeah, this is well worth it. And we have people who are, in their 50s and 60s that we train, and they use it and then they go and train and they feel better. Now, I had a question with you specifically about any knowledge that you might have with using this machine in combination with, say, a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Because I do know there's studies that show certain frequencies can help regenerate maybe some nerve issues or target certain areas. Are you aware or familiar of any of that information?
Yeah, I would not recommend the Biocharger with hyperbaric oxygen at the same time just because of sparks.
Well, no, so doing the hyperbaric, doing the Biocharger and then going into the hyperbaric oxygen chamber.
I think anything. I mean, anytime one of the biggest benefits with the Biocharger is you get better uptake of nutrients and better detoxification. So if you're going to have that effect on a cellular level where you can gate the cell membrane wall to uptake nutrients, detoxify, that's always a win-win. So if you got the extra oxygen going around, you got other things that are happening, nutrition, even chemotherapy, and you're trying to get things delivering that energy into the nucleus, that's where I think that the advantage of the Biocharger.
Awesome. So yeah, those two in combination will just help with the uptake. Okay. So I noticed that you had things in there like programs for nagalase. Um, like nagalase, the protein. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Like
Nagalese is how I.
nagalase, yeah.
So there was some Nagalese frequencies. I guess that there was a book related to Nagalese and his work that was frequency based.
Okay.
Those recipes from. So we're also looking for different sources of frequencies list besides just the right frequencies that are out there. There are other ones, and so somebody sent us that to create that recipe, and we've had really, really good feedback on that one.
Awesome. Okay. And so say somebody like, I'm from Connecticut and Lyme's disease is like ravaging the area. And is this something that people would just see, like say someone who's dealing with Lyme's disease, would you recommend that they start off with the Lyme recipes?
Yeah, I would say whatever works best for them, but that's typically what we start off with. And we typically with Lyme, we start off a little slower.
Okay.
You may not want to do it every single day right away.
Okay.
Maybe once every 2 or 3 days, just because there are some people that respond differently than others, especially with Lyme, depending on if it's acute or chronic.
They might detox too fast or something like that.
I mean, that's typically what happens is I think everything gets overloaded. And if you're not filtering it out, then it just recirculates.
Gotcha. Okay. So let me see if I covered most of this stuff. Yeah, is there anything you want to add or share that's like, I mean, I'm kind of blown away by the fact that this thing is going to play music. Like that just makes it, for me, just like a huge bonus on top of it.
Well, as a engineer mathematician, when you look at the spectrum of frequencies, it's not infinitely more, but many magnitudes more, because right now I'm discretely changing every second the harmonics and frequencies, whereas now I fill everything in and everything is just blended. And there's a relationship as the harmonics and frequencies. So not only what you're hearing, but there's a relationship with the harmonics and frequencies generated. They're also following the melodies. So if you do the right music, I think that, ultimately, I think that there is one note. I haven't hit that one note yet, but I believe there is, one universal note that, like in string theory, that all the other notes emit from. And one of these days, that's the goal ultimately.
Gotcha. Okay, that's awesome. And are you familiar with Dr. Emoto's work?
Surely. Yeah.
Yeah. So say, for example, I put my water bottle up. Is that going to affect the water next to the Biocharger?
I mean, writing words on there, we're talking about measured waves and things like that. I'd imagine it, I never have frozen it, sliced it up and look at the different ones.
Okay.
I imagine that just understanding what I like to do with my water is a ritual with me anyway. I'll charge my water up, but I also like to put it through a movement before I drink it.
Okay.
It's my water. And,
yeah.
Water in general is a charge. I mean, it has a charge in it. I mean, it's been, there's the, can't remember what his name is now, but there was a guy that 1800s that shot water through a needle, had a little floating leaf on there. And what happens is the leaf would build a static charge on it. And there's a guy named Walter Baumgartner in the 1980s that built one of these things. You could build up static a couple thousand volts with it, up to 15,000 volts, depending on the quality of the water. But he measured thousands of different water samples and shot it through that same needle and found that there was a relationship between that water and the voltage. So I think that there can be an effect on the water. I know that they use, for instance, water purification or for food processing, they use high voltage.
Okay.
So instead of using hot sterilization, they actually hit it with extremely high voltage and they'll kill bacteria and viruses in it. We also use ultraviolet light and light to help destroy,
purify the water. So it just out of curiosity, what do you use to charge and what do you use to vortex your water?
Tesla's turbine. So if you ever see traditional pumps, use a blade, and with the blade, you're pushing the water and it creates cavitation. You actually squeeze the water molecule down.
Oh,
Whereas
wow.
the turbine is, you just picture a CD disc and you spin it really fast. What happens is the water molecule sits on it, spins around, it's through centrifugal force, it spins out further. So the further out it goes in a circle, the faster it goes until it finally spits it out. And it creates this awesome vortex. But if you look at what it does to water molecules, it causes it to open up, changes the angle of it, and able to put more charge in it.
So I know you're a builder. Is this something you created, or is this something people can buy?
That's what I've just made.
Oh, man. See, there's another tool you could bake in, because I bet you anything people would buy that thing, because I'm like, I want that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is really, honestly, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I don't know if, Mike, if you're on and you're listening and can hear us. I've heard, are you there, Mike?
I am. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh,
I
there you are.
And had some issues connecting there, but finally got in, and I didn't want to interrupt. You guys were going pretty well, so wanted to let you guys do your thing. But I did want to circle back. You had kind of asked about parasites and people utilizing different recipes.
Right.
And I know you probably had a chance to link up with David, our head of support and recipe development on that end through the process. And seeing him go through and utilize his approach is pretty awesome in the way of these recipes being created and developed, and being able to tap into some of these databases that people have kind of documented what frequency is reacting with certain parasites, and being able to look to that research and incorporate that, as well as some stuff of complementing systems and areas of the body that may help the body naturally when getting that ability up, our immune system being able to take over and kind of push those out and
fight it off.
Yeah, exactly. And just restoring that voltage. And as Jim said, just giving that cell that proper voltage to really just do what it's supposed to do and get our bodies functioning properly is really neat to see that. And it's something too, where not only humans are dealing with parasites, but our furry friends too. I don't know if you've got dogs or anything like that, but they love the Biocharger and benefit from it just like we do.
Yeah, basically anybody, with voltage in their cells, right? Thank you for circling back on that. So I wanted to let you guys know that I'm a Wim Hof instructor, and I have like this thread that's on WhatsApp, and I was just, showing people around, and everybody was like, "Hey man, what's that tool?" And then I explained it to them, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, that sounds amazing." So I think you guys have an untapped market. One of the guys actually bought one, right? He went up and purchased one for a friend of mine in France. And yes, yeah. And so you guys basically have an untapped market. I don't think people really know the power of this tool. I mean, would you say that's fair?
I would say that's fair. And just where this technology has been around, or these modalities have been around for quite a while, and just now incorporating that software and re-releasing and being on the market since about 2015, I would say most of our market base were those end users at home looking to benefit their own personal wellness efforts. But we've seen a pretty big shift in just kind of culture here in the US, and people kind of looking towards different modalities and different things to support those wellness efforts. And now kind of getting that term, the biohacker. And that's something that we're definitely getting a deeper into that market as well, and really looking to expand and kind of get out there, because we agree, we see that, and we're in contact with more individuals like yourself every day that are looking for the next thing to really kind of that peak performance market. Whereas we used to look at it more as athletic performance, but no, it really does expand to not just athletes, because some athletes hang it up and they're retired and they go to the gym and that's about it, but they're not on the field. They're not looking to compete there, but they're looking to feel good, whether it's in the gym or at home, or moving on to the next chapter and starting a business and wanting that energy that they used to have when they were 20, 30, and so on. So it's a market that we're really getting into, and we'll actually be attending the Upgrade Labs conference next in April. So we'll be out there in April and being able to get the Biocharger on the eyes of those and working to really get into that market more.
Awesome. So
I have a cool question for you.
Sure. Go ahead.
So the Wim Hof, the Wim Hof breathing group that you had, how did they like it? Because we have had awesome feedback with people who use it with Wim Hof, that their experience had been magnitudes better when they use it with the Biocharger. It's just like it's a complete game changer, and I've heard that from every single person that's used it with Wim Hof.
It's a total game changer, which is why I was asking if you knew anything about like hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Because when I went, I'm from Connecticut, and so your director of marketing was in Connecticut, and I hooked up with Mike. He sent me to her, and I was like, hey, excuse me for a second, I'm just going to do some breathing. And I started doing the Wim Hof while I was testing the Biocharger out, and I was like, whoa, this is like next level. Because essentially what you're explaining happens to the cells when we do the Wim Hof breathing. We're just, I think, exponentially allowing the uptake of energy and nutrients and getting the mitochondria and the ATP production revved up. And so I use it here when I do my workshops before and sometimes during the breathing. And
Wow.
so it takes it to another level.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and I've done Wim Hof a few times with it. I wouldn't consider myself a practitioner or anything, but I've definitely done it maybe half a dozen times, and I absolutely love it whenever I do it. I just need to get more in tune with it.
Yeah, sit right around the Biocharger and start to do that, and you'll feel the difference for sure. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. Any last comments about the Biocharger before we sign off here? And I just want to thank you guys tremendously for this this interview.
Yeah, no problem. Nope.
Yeah,
No, you guys are good.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
I think so. Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, it's always nice to be able to connect on another level with our clients as well. So we really do appreciate this time as far as being able to get more feedback, and I know it's only going to help us kind of advance through the whole journey of this with the Biocharger and getting into different markets, because that's really how it started and getting into the hands of people, and then starting with 5 recipes and evolving to over 750, and we know that we're not stopping at 750. And yeah, we're excited to get that out there, and we look forward to working with you here in the future too.
Yep, it's enhanced my life, so anything I can do to help, let me know. And I appreciate it, and I'm gonna put this on my YouTube channel, and I'll send it to you guys, and then I'm also gonna share it with my back pain crowd, which I have about 20,000 followers as well. So hopefully you guys get some exposure through that. And all right, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Ian, will you keep us posted as far as when you'll be kind of releasing that? Are you going to be going through and I guess kind of putting your spin on it and your touches on it before it gets to YouTube?
Oh, so yeah. Oh, so when I release it to YouTube, the main reason for this is for the book Healing Hacks. And so I'm going to put a piece in there on the Biocharger and just frequency and vibration. So this, I can kind of do whatever you guys want. I can just upload this, and then you guys can cut it however you want, and then say, use this. This is better. Or so if you want to do that, I'm totally open for that as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And just so we can get some eyes from some other team members that weren't able to join us here today. And I'm sure they're going to love to hear kind of this back and forth, and it'll get their wheels turning as well.
Yeah, I'll as soon as I upload it, I'll upload it unlisted, and then I'll send it off to you guys, and then you can let me know.
That
Awesome.
sounds great.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah,
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.